So good afternoon, everyone. Good morning and a warm welcome to you all joining us from across the Horn of Africa region and beyond. My name is Lorraine Curry, and it's an honor to be moderating the seventh and final in the It's Not Your Fault series, which is being hosted by the We Cannot Wait program at SIHA Network with support from the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Today's dialogue focuses on a theme that sits at the heart of struggles for justice across the Horn of Africa region, and the theme today is on women and girls' rights in the context of religion and culture. And we all know that across the region, Sudan, Somalia, Somaliland, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Uganda, and other parts of the region, women's lives are profoundly shaped and too often restricted by patriarchal interpretations of culture, tradition, and religious texts. And we know that these interpretations are not neutral, they are not defined, they are political choices. And they continue to determine who has freedom, who has voice, who has access to justice, and who was allowed to fully participate in life. And yet, amid these challenges and dynamics, we see that across all the countries that SIHA is working in, there is incredible resistance. There are feminist scholars, progressive religious leaders, women human rights defenders, community organizers, and everyday women who are reclaiming cultural and religious spaces, challenging harmful and toxic norms that have been used to justify discrimination for generations. Today, we are going to center these voices, and I am deeply, deeply honored to be introducing three amazing speakers who will be ground experience, sharing legal insights and feminist interpretations into the status quo. I will start with Dr. Faizat Badmus-Busari, who is a feminist lawyer and researcher, and is also the head of programs at SIHA Network. In this role, she oversees gender justice, legal empowerment, in conflict and states. She brings decades of experience to feminist programming, policy advocacy, and movement building from across West Africa and Horn of Africa. She holds a Doctor of Juridical Science with a specialization in gender and Islamic family law, and her work is critical around the intersections of law, religion, social justice, and has led high impact work across several countries. She's recognized for her leadership in convening women's collectives. Faizat, welcome to this space. Our second speaker, Lina Nadunga, who is a human rights lawyer with 15 years of experience advancing the rights of women in grassroots and at-risk Muslim communities. Her work spans from human rights programming, governance, access to justice, gender equality, with a focus forming Muslim family law and strengthening protections for women both in the formal and informal systems. Her work has been central and centered around national advocacy, around gender responsive Muslim family laws, and she's authored a number of influential researches. Lina has also been very vital in strategic coalitions around the theme and continues to mobilize Muslim feminists in Uganda through Musawa. You're welcome, Lina. Our third and final speaker is Nada Hassan Nasrat, who is currently the head of Women's Public Participation Program at the Center for Egyptian Women's Legal Assistance based in Egypt. The program works on promoting economic and social rights, supporting feminist movements, analyzing the effect of climate change from a gender perspective, and also working around women, peace, and security, and doing international advocacy. For over a decade, she's been working as Seula's advocacy coordinator, and she's also lectured several seminars at different universities on women's rights in Egypt at Harvard, State University of New York, Columbia, among others. She has also worked very closely with Musawa and FES. So you're very welcome, Nada. So before we hear from these three amazing speakers, I'm just going to share some very, very brief webinar rules or norms that we would follow. This is a feminist and safe space, but feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box and tell us where you're joining us from, the name of your organization. And as we do so, we'd like to encourage that we all keep our microphones muted unless you're speaking. And we can also use the chat box to post any of our questions, comments, or contribute to this conversation. We also have a Q&A. After the panel discussions, we'll have a poll question where we can all contribute to this conversation. If you have a message, a question, a comment that you'd like to be seen by everyone, please leave it in the chat and direct it to everyone. But where you want to have this privately to one of our panelists, please direct this to them. We will try and keep this webinar within a time limit of 1 hour, 30 minutes. And if the questions you've raised are responded to by any of our panelists, please feel free to email them to info@sihanet.org. Lastly, I would like to say we have interpretation and we have 3 languages: Arabic, Somali, and Amharic. So you can use the icon, the interpretation icon, which is a globe symbol at the bottom of your Zoom screen, to select the language of your choice. And we welcome an open and transparent conversation around this theme. And we hope we'll all be very respectful to one another. So with that, I think it would be really nice to start to listen to our speakers. And our first speaker is Dr. Faizat. If you'd share to have my title was working and positioned, please share with us examples from other Muslim majority contexts where we've seen progressive jurisprudence, how this has been has led to impact and successfully advanced women's rights. And while you're at that, I have one final question for you, Faizat. If you can also share what is urgently needed at the regional level, continental level, and at global level. Over to you, Faizat. I have been informed that Pfizer's internet is not very stable at the minute. And we do understand that this is the Horn of Africa region where we might have challenges with our internet once in a while. So I will go over to our next speaker, who's Nada Nashat. Nada, from your experience working in Egypt and the region, please speak to us about how harmful interpretations of culture and religion are shaping women's rights, especially within the family law and public participation. What are the most common arguments or narratives that are used to justify discriminatory practices against women in the name of culture, in the name of religion, and how these should be and can be challenged? And also, if you can share with us some of your very practical experiences having worked with Musawa, Seula, what progressive interpretation of religion looks like. So over to you, Nada, and after you will come back to Pfizer. So over to you, Nada. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Loreen. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'll give you a minute to switch to Arabic as I'm going to speak into Arabic. Should I share my presentation or someone would share it? I can share. Okay.
Yes, we are sharing it for you.
Thank you so
Thank
much. Yes. Thank you so much. أنا هتكلم
I'm
بالعربي
going to speak in
وهحاول
Arabic, and I'm going to speak slowly. I'm going to slow down. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all very well, and I hope uh, I'm going to speak about the role of uh, um, Islamic country of the Sharia is aware of that we need to address two issues in particular. So if you move to the next slide.
ايه اللي بيحصل؟ ايه
So what
المشكلة
happens?
الرئيسية؟ المشكلة الرئيسية ان احنا النهاردة بقى عندنا
The main
ثقافة
problem is that
وعندنا
we
الدين
now are
والدولة
faced with a culture and we are
هذه
faced with
الدول
religion.
بتتعامل
And
بيها
in
معانا
our
انه لما بنيجي
countries
نتكلم عن
where
اي
we
حقوق
are
للنساء
struggling with
هي
authoritarian modes
بتمثل
of power,
بعملية
we
انه
find that the
هذه الحقوق
challenges
ضد الدين،
that women are
هذه
faced
الحقوق انتوا
are
عايزين تبوظوا
huge,
المجتمع،
and
انتوا
that
عايزين تداسوا هذا
these are
المجتمع.
framed
طيب لما بنيجي
as
نتكلم عن
counter,
الإشكالية
and people accuse
الرئيسية
us of trying to ruin our
الدين، لما ناخد
societies.
الدين الإسلامي
So when we speak
كمثال،
speaking about
فالدين
religion and speaking
عندنا
about
ما كانش حاجة
Islam
جاهزة
in
أو يعتمد
particular,
على
um,
توضيحات، ولا يعتمد
we
على
need
فكرة إن أنا
uh,
عندي
to
قاعدة،
understand that
يعني
there are
الظاهرة في
parameters
الشارع
within
إن
this
إحنا
religion,
عندنا
and
القاعدة المطلقة
that
هي
we need to be
قاصرة
aware that there
التأثير،
is a lie
كل شيء فيما عدا
about
الشهادة، يعني فيما
uh,
عدا قول لا إله إلا الله
totalitarian rule
محمد رسول
within
الله.
Islam, because
والحاجة التانية
there is a
اللي
lot of
فيها حتى
jurisprudence
ادعاء بأنه
within
في
Islam. Everything else
واضحة
is open
وصريحة،
to
اختلفت
interpretation. The
التشريعات
only
فيها،
thing
بنشوف
that is
تشريعات
not
مختلفة في الطلاق
open to
والتوريث
interpretation
فيما
is the
يتعلق
profession of faith, which is the
بانتشار
unicity of
الطلاق،
God. Everything
بالتعدد،
else is
بأشكال
should be
مختلفة.
open
لو
to
أنا
interpretation,
هفوكس
such
شوية
as interpretations around
وهعمل
divorce, and we have
تركيز
multiple
شوية
interpretations
على
of divorce. So
المجتمع
I'm just going
المصري،
to
احنا بنشوف
hone
مثلا،
into
واعتقد ان ده كمان
Egyptian
القاره
society. For
الافريقي
example,
او
we
شرق
see that
افريقيا تعاني من
within
احد الاسباب
Eastern
الرئيسيه اللي
Africa, we
بتظهر
feel
استمرار
that
تشويه
one of the
الاعضاء
issues that we
التناسليه
faced
هو
is continuous
وبعض رجال
uh,
الدين بيقولوا لنا انه هذا من
excision
الدين.
of
طب
women's
منين هذا من
genitalia.
الدين
We
وانا
know
عندي
that
القانون
some
نفسه بيجرمه؟
religious leaders
وهنا
actually
بتبقى اشكاليه
continue
تنفيذ
to
القانون،
speak about
لانه
this
بعض
practice
الناس
as
ورجال
grounded
الدين
within
يستخدموا
Islamic practices.
الثقافه
But we need to question how
بالشكل او
these
اللقاء
leaders, these
الديني
religious leaders,
لتجميد
use
بعض
culture
الجرائم ضد
uh,
النساء وضد
and
الفتيات
give it
على ان هي ظاهرة غير
religious
شرعية. وده بيحط
legitimacy
اشكالية
in
كبيرة،
order
غير
to
انه
keep
تصحيح
these
متعمد
practices
للدين،
alive.
لكن هو
So
كمان لو انا
I think
هركز على
that this
القانون
is a
وبشكل
very
رئيسي
direct and
كسر لهذا
deliberate
القانون وعدم احترامه
um,
ليه وعدم احترام
misinterpretation of religion, and
لحقوق
it is
النساء
relates
وصحته
to the lack
احنا بنشوفها
of rights
احنا
which
في
are
الواقع
for
المصري
women and girls.
مفترض دستور،
And we
احنا دستور
the
المصري
specifically Article 2 are that the
مدنية
and all right of
انه
uh, the right to
جدا
allegations, religious
عندنا في التشريعات، لانه
adherents
السياق
to
المصري
actually base
محدد
their
التشريع على
laws
مذهب
on
واحد،
other
ومع
forms
انه
of
القانون برضو بيقول
legislation
ان
which are
لو
not
في
based
مزايا
in the
تظهر
Sharia. Uh, so the law actually allowed
فيها
each there's
مشاكل
privilege and
الانسان. نيجي
ability
على
to
القانون
use
المدني نلاقي
different forms of belief.
رقم واحد،
When we look at
ثقافة
law,
رقم
we
واحد،
see
وعلم
that
الثقافة.
culture is
لما
what
نلاقي حاجة
prevails,
في
and
الثقافة يبقى
therefore
نشوف
everything is
الدين،
based
يبقى نشوف
on
الدين بيقول
culture.
ايه.
And
وهنا بقى
we have
الإشكالية
to
بتظهر،
first look at
حين
culture, and if
تتصادم
there is
الثقافة
nothing
مع الدين
which is offered
الثقافة
by
تربح
culture, we then have
ويتحول
to
إلى
resort to religious
قنبلة بدل
parameters.
ما هو
And
زي
here we see
ان هو
the mix
مجتمع
between
متدين او
religion
عندنا
and culture. And
نتبع
since we frame our
الشريعة
societies
ونتبع
as
مناهج
somewhat
الدين
religious
والحديث
organizations
وأسس الحديث، لا
and
الحقيقة انه
based on
الثقافة
religious
هي اللي
organizations and
تتحكم وهي اللي
parameters, we
تسيطر،
feel that
ولكن الشعوب
culture
ورجال
and
الدين هم
religion
اللي بيضفوا
hold
عقائد
huge influence. We see that religious
هذه
leaders have
الثقافة.
huge influence within these
طب ليه مهم
societies,
ان
and that
احنا
these
نتكلم عن هذه
religious
النقاط؟ لانه
the
الحقيقة
info of these religious
كمان
leaders
انه لما
gives
نكون
these
محددين جدا
religious
او
parameters
نستخدم
a
معيار
lofty
ومنظور
position.
ضيق
So
جدا
when we speak
للدين
about
سواء اسلامي او
different
مسيحي،
parameters, and when we actually narrow the lens through which we see things, or we narrow the religious lens, we know that this impacts how laws actually impact the real lives of women. For example, we see that women are not able to terminate pregnancy, even though the religious parameters actually allow for termination of pregnancy on the volitional basis, as long as it does not exceed a period of 40 weeks. So we know that women are not able to occupy a lofty example, because there is a wrong belief that women are too emotional and therefore unable, unequipped to actually, and it's not based on any real religious parameters. We have proverbs which actually advocate for the weakness of women, and that enhance this notion that women are unable to guide men, because men are in the position of leadership at all times. So therefore, from this perspective, we're speaking about specific constitutional rights and legal rights which need to be supported and which need to be protected. When we know that in the law, men and women are equal. However, the way the law is actually executed does not convey this aim or this objective. When we look at guidance or leadership roles, we know that we have a huge dilemma, because the problems related to the law are actually related to how the constitutional rights are actually reached. We know that women's testimonies are considered to be the value, to embody the half of a man's witness. And we know that as a woman, we are very aware that our testimony is extremely powerful, because as women, we inhabit these private spheres and we are privy to things which take place in the private sphere and within neighborhoods in a way which is more powerful than the way men actually have access to these spaces. So we know that some of the reforms are actually based on Western legislations. We know that we are challenged in terms of how women are framed as emotional beings who are unable to make decisions. And we know that all these very negative characterizations are based on patriarchal norms, which actually protect the right of men to dominate and to have hegemonic presences within different cultural spheres and legal spheres. Um, uh, in the next slide, we're going to speak about uh, the different narratives which are actually widely disseminated in order to justify these different forms of discrimination. When we look at uh, equality from a feminist perspective, we are accused, the feminists, of being agents, negative agents who are trying to destroy the societal foundations. And this actually impacts our presence, and which impacts our influences across different spheres within society. This kind of narrative actually destroys or undermines the rights of women, and it justifies these notions of leadership, which we need to challenge somewhat. We need to look at these from legal perspectives, and we should not take culture as divine. Culture should change and should modify and should evolve according to the needs of people within a specific time and place. They should be context-based, and they should be able to meet the needs of a specific society within a historical framework. Um, we need to speak about Egyptian society. We need to speak about the whole of Egyptian society. We cannot exclude our Christian citizens. Because the majority of the Egyptian population is Muslim. However, we do have a significant Christian minority within Egypt, and therefore they have legal frameworks which are equally problematic. We have very specific laws which impact Christian women, specifically in relation to marriage laws and divorce, where these women are unable to gain divorce easily. There are huge challenges which are faced within the sphere, and the women cannot actually present themselves within these spheres in order to actually gain rights which should be availed to them. From this perspective, we would like to discuss how we challenge these narratives and these dominant understandings. We need to speak about how we actually face these religious leaders and to actually place these religious parameters within the public debates which are taking place. It's within our rights to actually impose this, and it is within our rights to gain the knowledge which is necessary to support our claims. We cannot discuss these very sensitive issues with religious leaders who are constantly accusing us of trying to undermine societal norms. Therefore, we need to be able to look at each point very accurately and to actually look at the rules of law which govern this and the interpretations. We are asking for a civilian state of governance and a civilian state, and therefore we need to take women's rights and their access to equality very, very seriously, and to base this on the parameters established by CEDAW. We need to be able to move as institutions and as members of civil society in a very robust way. We need to also take into consideration people's lived experiences and to actually marry them with legal frameworks so that the law is completely distinct from women's lived experiences. The law should not remain an abstract entity. It needs to translate into women's actual lives, into society's social lives in general. They need to be part and parcel of a very robust and very clear discussion, which is based within real lives. We need to build these alliances so that we are able to work within real spaces and not work in abstraction. We need to look at the principles of equality and equity and look at the parameters and structures which actually enhance human dignity, because these are the actual values which are enshrined and espoused within Islamic jurisprudence and within all divine laws. The objective of Islamic jurisprudence is to uphold these values of dignity, and we want to reach to we need to access the intentionality behind these legalistic and jurisprudential parameters. And I will stop at this stage and allow for questions in the discussion.
Thank you so much, Nada, for that
شكرا
rich
جزيلا
contribution and sharing practical examples with deep connection to Islam from a feminist perspective, and also rooting this in women's lives. So thank you again, Nada. I will come back to Dr. Weiser. And as I had raised the question to you, it would be good to hear your reflections on how harmful interpretations emerge, circulate, and become institutionalized, and what transformative alternatives are out there when we look at the context of Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, Somaliland, and South Sudan. And from SIHA's vantage point as a regional feminist women's rights organization, well-positioned, what can you share and how can you share? Can you be able to share examples from other Muslim majority countries where we are seeing progressive jurisprudence that has advanced women's rights, and also with SIHA doing a lot of work on the policy and advocacy front? What shifts are urgently needed at the regional level, continental level, and global level? So over to you, Faiza.
Thank you very much, Laurie, and apologies earlier, I lost my connection. Good afternoon, everyone. Really glad to be here and to be able to speak on this very important topic. And, you know, as we've seen across the Horn, you know, at SIHA being a regional feminist institution, what gives us the vantage points, you know, on culture and religion and how it continues to shape the women's realities and women and girls. So for what we've noticed is that it's not a diversity of problem, right? It's not separate or different in a different context, but it's set of deeply interconnected pattern where patriarchal interpretation and culture, as well as religion, you know, travel across the borders, you know, and it also takes a very rooted platform in political systems and becomes a tool for social control. So when I look at what are the regional patterns that we have or that we've been seeing across the different countries, and to be honest, across the continent, actually, I being a Nigerian, for example, can also say firsthand, these are things that we also see on a day-to-day in the country. So the first, you can go to the next slide. The first is that we've seen that culture and religion are weaponized as authoritative, and just like Nada spoke, an unquestionable source of social order. And this is because of the interpretations that are treated as sacred and immutable, that is, we can't change them. So they become extremely difficult to challenge, or, you know, they try to mute us not to be able to challenge this interpretation, even though they either, you know, contradict our fundamental rights or our lived reality. So that unquestionable authority is one of the common patterns that we've seen. The second is that the patriarchal actors themselves, you know, be it the traditional leaders, the armed groups, political elites, or male-dominated religious institutions, they often position themselves as protectors of the culture. They're the gatekeepers. They are the ones that are supposed to protect it. But in practice, what this gatekeeping means is that they also gatekeep our bodies. You know, they control our mobility and our choices. And we've seen this, you know, in Somalia, we've seen this in Sudan, where interpretation of honor, morality, and appropriate conduct, you know, have been weaponized to justify conflict-related sexual violence. In Somalia, we've seen it also with the sexual offenses bill being changed to rape and immorality bill. And then it begs the question, what is immorality? Who defines what immorality is? And how would that immorality be used, you know, in the legal sphere to criminalize women? The third is the harmful interpretation, and I think Nada spoke, you know, extensively about that as well. And this is something we've also seen that flourishes when it's in a moment of crisis. So, you know, similarly like Sudan, South Sudan, where institutions are fragile and the conflicts, it's also disrupting the civil life. The sudden shifts in religious edicts can dramatically restrict a woman's right overnight. And we saw this in Ethiopia, where there was this edict on FGM, you know, and, you know, thankfully we mobilized against it, you know, the women's group mobilized immediately against it. So this overnight control can either, you know, be progressive or regressive, and it all depends on political interest, definitely not based on theological consistency. The last pattern that we've seen is also the harmful discourse that begins in one country can quickly appear in another. And again, using the FGM theory of how, you know, of how it started in the Gambia and then moved to, you know, to Ethiopia, and then started spreading. So, you know, these networks, this diaspora influence, political alliances, digital platform allow harmful discourse move quickly. We can also see an example from even here in Uganda, where a small group of parliamentarians in 2023, the Entebbe Interparliamentary Conference on Family, it has now grown into a continent-wide coalition of more than 60 members of parliament, championing a restrictive African family values agenda. They've expanded both linguistically and geographically, and they are now circulating a draft called the African Charter on Family Values and Sovereignty through all their national parliaments, and they also intend to present that, next year at the African Commission. So you can see how all of this kind of transcends and move across regions and spreads quickly. To your other question about how the patriarchal interpretation dominates legal system, one of the key things is the issue of legal pluralism. And that's where, and as we will see from most African countries, that's where we have statutory laws, customary law, and religious law operating side by side within the country, kind of creating this overlapping space where women's rights are easily undermined. And what we see in practice is that, even where the statutory provisions are and protects women, right, or they exist, they are routinely overridden by religious and customary adjudication, also by personal beliefs, because sometimes these laws are available, but as your personal belief, you believe, oh, I need to go to Sharia court to get judgment or to get justice. So all of these usually kind of also interface in these situations, and they're usually particularly relevant when it comes to family law. So issues of marriage, inheritance, custody, marital disputes is where these 3 layers of law come into play. And women are usually either pressured to socially, morally, or economically again personal beliefs to resolve these issues through the systems that privilege male guardianship and community expectations over their individual rights. Next slide, please. But before proceeding to talking about what has worked and what has not worked, I also want to point out, and I think Nada touched on this well as well. It's important for us to also realize that there's a difference between Sharia and Sharia Islamic law, which is fiqh. Of course, Sharia is, what is considered divine, the parts. It's also the divine ethical principles, as Nada mentioned, principles of equality, principles of justice, dignity, compassion, but it's not fixed, right? So we have to interpret it. And that's where Sharia law comes in. And the Sharia law is now it consists of the human interpretation, so man-made interpretation of those divine principles. Ideally, it's supposed to be flexible, and historically, it has been changeable. But for some reason, the gatekeeping have made us believe that those are not changeable and it is fixed. So it's important to have this, too clear understanding of, because the moment you want to challenge something, then it becomes you're challenging God. So one is important to know that one is divine, and then the other one, it's not free from critique. We can change, it's changeable. It's based on context, it's based on reality, and based on the current conditions, and I'll get a little bit into my thinking around this. So and as we've seen across the continent, one of the things that really dominates our legal system is what we think dominates is Sharia, but it's really not. It's the patriarchal codification misrepresented as the divine will. So the distinction really matters because one is a legal rule and then the other one is not. Also going into the interpretation, another way in which the interpretation dominates our legal system is also when we talk about short forum shopping, which is takhayu. That is, you're looking for what the best one. So as maybe many people know, we have 4 schools of thought, at least under the Islamic jurisprudence. And within those 4 rules of thought, sometimes when cases are taken to court, it becomes strategic selection of ruling from the different schools on which one, you prefer that will give you the outcome. And what we've seen in practice is that powerful actors, mainly men, they shop for the interpretation that benefits them the most. And, when they're taking the cases to court, maybe custody or whatever case it is. And even though the dominant school of thought applicable in that community is different. They use this selective use of Sharia, shifting between the schools or between the religious or customary cults, enabling them to expand their authority while restricting women's rights. It also exposes the deeply human and political nature, as I've been explaining, of this interpretation, since the ruling are chosen for convenience and not necessarily for theology. We also saw this clear example in the case of Amina Lawal in Nigeria, who was stoned to death or was sentenced to stoning to death. And, it was initially taken on the Shafi'i school of thought, and then later it was changed to Hanbali school of thought. So that selective selection also lets us know that it's changeable, it's based on human interpretation and how we see it. Now, to move to what has worked, you can go to the next slide. One, I would say, is knowledge building. So equipping women and for SIHA, right, to challenge the harmful interpretation. And I think that's one of our strongest tool, the feminist knowledge building. And we've done this across all the countries that we work in: Sudan, Ethiopia, Somaliland, South Sudan, Uganda. We've trained women lawyers, we've trained women rights activists, journalists, and community defenders to just deconstruct the patriarchal interpretation. We also partner with Musawa, who offers context-specific knowledge on these issues, such as child marriage, guardianship, women's political and economic participation, and then the rights and responsibilities of spouses in the Muslim family law. And the way that we approach this is by using the same texts that are often mobilized to restrict women, and then we reintroduce the juristic diversity, contextualized interpretation, and then right-based reading, so that women acquire the knowledge and the challenge rulings in their community. I see that I'm almost out of time, so I'm just going to quickly run through. The second is knowledge product. SIHA has the Women in Islam Journal, and a central part of that component is bringing together feminist scholars and practitioners to interrogate culture, religion, and gender through, contextually grounded analysis. So we have so many more other knowledge products that we produce, and we use it to challenge knowledge policymakers, present it to them so they're able to see. Feminist organizing is another way that we do it. As the heart of SIHA, we're a movement building network. So we believe that with our 220 members organizations across the Horn, we believe that change cannot happen through legal arguments alone or working in silos. It requires collective solidarity, visibility, and of course, public pressure to get this done. The last, you can go to the next slide, please. And then there's also feminist reinterpretation using the 3 Cs. And then really the concept of the 3 Cs is that we have to look at the context. Every juristic ruling emerged from a particular political, historical, and cultural environment. And then now that we're in a pre-modern society, it's different from, modern society is different from the pre-modern society. So there's no theological basis for transplanting what has been said before into the current context that we are living in. The second is concept, which allows these rulings, they were never intended to be universal or timeless. It's supposed to address a specific issue that came up at that specific time and not become, eternal mandates for us. The last is content, right? So Islamic legal thought has always evolved around centuries, regions, and even during the Prophet's time, it kept continuing to evolve. But the interpretation of it and the human interpretation of it, is shaped by social order and gender norms, and not divine interpretation or divine command. Next slide. I'll just quickly go through, very quickly the lessons from other Muslim majority contexts to just show you that it's possible. We had the Morocco Mudawana, which allows, women became equal, that their law, they had the Islamic family reform. It allows women to become equal heads of households. Under guardianship, women do not need a male guardian to marry anymore. Polygamy, while it was not banned, it was made practically impossible. Tunisia, on the other hand, did ban polygamy on the same basis of the Quran and the text, right? And then they've even gone further to continue to do more reforms. In 2017, they passed one of the strongest domestic violence laws in the Arab and Muslim countries, which even criminalizes marital rape. We've also seen, coalitions like Malaysia Sisters in Islam, of feminist scholars who are also reinterpreting the text and challenging these patriarchal monopolies. And then, of course, we have countries also like Nigeria, which also has its own a lot of problems. The Islamic law has not been reformed, but the case laws that are coming out of it forms jurisprudence. So, for example, they've overturned stoning, death sentences through stoning. So this can also be used in other contexts. Now, finally, what do we need to do? Last slide, please. First, we must demand from the African Union, for example, and other regional bodies to recognize this harmful interpretation of culture and religion as a political tool. It's not a religious necessity. And looking at the framework that is coming up to them next year, we must advocate against it, strongly advocate and collectively. Second is the need for progressive codification of family law. Once it's codified, it eliminates contradiction and the harms that women have. The third is to invest in women's legal education, feminist jurisprudence, and training of female religious scholars. And then lastly, we must also strengthen community accountability, ensuring that religious leaders who promote harmful interpretation do not operate above scrutiny. So our community deserves transparency, dialogue, and the ability to question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Faizat, for that and for grounding us so powerfully in the regional patterns and possibilities for progressive interpretation, as well as sharing SIHA's very rich experience around this theme. Anna, who's going to be talking to us about how religious jurisprudence can be mobilized towards expanding rather than restricting women's rights, what reforms and interpretive frameworks are emerging. And also she's worked a lot around the Qadi courts, engaging with them, how religious jurisprudence can be mobilized to expand and engage. She's worked around issues on addressing key barriers that women are facing navigating religious courts, and she'll be sharing this experience with us, and the connection to divorce, custody, inheritance, as well as any promising precedents or reforms that we are seeing in Uganda that can be lessons and reflections for the rest of the region. So Lina, over to you. Lina, we don't hear you. So let's try and give Lina a minute. She's joining us from one of the rural villages in Uganda, and it could be her internet connection. Okay, Lina, you're there? Over to
Hi,
you.
Maureen. Okay, just to start off my discussion, I would like to point out that Uganda is governed by multiple legal systems, which include customary, religious, and the statutory laws, which are also known as the common laws. And when you look at how religious jurisprudence can be mobilized to expand women's rights, we shall first consider the issue of interpretive flexibility through the reformist scholars. We have quite a number of scholars at the moment who are using the internet aggressively to raise awareness about human rights within the religious frameworks, but specifically influencing mindset change about women's rights and gender equality within the religious frameworks. We can also consider strategic interest litigation, where in April this year, we had one of the most prominent Muslim members of parliament seek leave for parliament to introduce a private member's bill, which is the Qadi Court's bill. And I think this is now the third time where we are seeking audience of parliament to introduce it as to introduce the Qadi Court's bill as a private member's bill in order in order to address the legislative gaps in the regulation of Muslim family laws in the country. And we also had a petition in court where we can also use the courts of law as strategic avenues for influencing or advocating for reforms, where we have one of the a local faith-based non-government organization called Islamic Women Initiative for Law and Peace. They petitioned the Constitutional Court for the executive arm of government to pass a directive to Parliament to expedite the process of passing the Qadi Courts Bill, which we have been advocating for the last 30 years. The platform of advocating for reforms has also been utilized since we sought reforms for family laws in the country, including the secular laws, during the process when the Domestic Relations Bill, which is currently known as the Marriage Bill, was introduced in Parliament. That was 30 years ago. So when the bill was introduced, the Muslims sought to have a separate law, which we called the Qadi Courts Bill. It was transformed and changed shape quite a number of times. But as we speak, we are still referring to it as the Qadi Courts Bill to regulate our Muslim personal law status. Because at the moment, our family laws are governed by a system which is informal and is largely unregulated. Then we can also use the international platforms. During the 81st session of CEDAW committee session, we introduced the idea, we shared recommendations for the reforms in the area of the legal framework, reforming legal framework for marriage, divorce, and inheritance, addressing harmful social traditional norms like polygamy, like bride price, and child marriages, and also addressing the issue of violence against women and girls, as well as enhancing access to justice for women within the family law frameworks. But the recommendations that were specifically looking at the Muslim personal law status included setting minimum standards for appointment of the judges, because at the moment, it is only an imam who has memorized the Quran, even without legal background or formal education, who is adjudicating the cases or the cases within the courts. And also, we recommended that they should provide capacity building on gender responsiveness for the judges or the imams who sit on the courts, and also to regulate the operations of the courts, because, like I said, currently they are unregulated and are operating informally. Then when you look at the issue of the intersection of the legal pluralism and women's access to justice, as well as the patriarchal interpretations, because Uganda recognizes multiple legal systems, you realize that for us as Muslims, it is the Muslim personal law which governs our family affairs, but it often clashes or intersects with the customary practices, which are usually patriarchal in nature. So within the interpretations of Sharia, as we are all aware, certain patriarchal views persist, especially regarding rights to marriage, divorce, inheritance, and child custody. So most of the time, these patriarchal views reinforce gender inequalities and limit women's rights and autonomy. The fact that we also lack codified Muslim laws makes it hard for women to advocate for their rights within the religious framework. So they seek recourse to the statutory or the common laws, which in most cases are viewed as Western culture that does not, that usually interferes with the divine teachings of the Quran. So Muslim women usually find themselves caught in between the three systems, where customary practices often prevail, because even when you look at how our Islamic marriages are celebrated in Uganda, Usually, a couple will first celebrate the customary before they upgrade it to the Islamic. So you find that the customary teachings usually prevail over the religious teachings, which definitely undermines the right to the women's rights and gender equality. And you also find that Muslim women are not aware about their rights. They're not aware about their rights within the religious, even within the statutory frameworks. So they rely or they conform to the society pressure of accepting the discriminative norms, which usually impact on their access to justice avenues. The barriers that women face when navigating the religious courts, especially regarding our Muslim personal law status, marriage, divorce, inheritance, and guardianship. The Qadi courts are not effectively operational because we don't have clear rules and guidelines for their legal structure and operational procedures, which are in line with human rights standards. So you find that most of the time when women seek justice within these courts, they're not given a fair hearing because, one, we don't even have female representation on these courts, but also women are usually not heard. When a woman reports a case in these courts, she's told to first bring her husband, and it is the husband who is heard above the woman's needs. We also have an issue of limited awareness about human rights within the religious framework. Most of the knowledge that we have as Muslim women is what has been handed down to us by the patriarchal sheikhs or the imams who interpret the religious text in discriminative and in a manner which violates our rights as women. So you find that because of that ignorance, we are forced to succumb to what is told to us by the imams who are adjudicating the cases on these courts. Women most often lack legal representation on these courts. The number of times I have represented women on the Sharia courts, you find that it is often a privilege to be given access to those courts. And most often than not, it is because sometimes I have rapport with one of the judges that they supposedly accept me to represent the women. So that is that status. For women who don't have legal representation, do not get the justice that they are seeking. Then, of course, the lack of legality and the law to operationalize the courts leaves gaps for clear enforcement of the decisions. The decisions are patriarchal in nature, they are discriminative, they are biased most of the time. So because of lack of clear linkage to the statutory system, you find that even enforcement of the decisions, even when they are in favor of the women, lies at the discretion of the parties. And also, you find that the imams are not willing to enforce their decisions, especially if they are against the men. So the lack of proper regulation and monitoring attracts structural and operational violations. Our courts, which are operating informally, are not monitored within the formal judicial systems. No monitoring is done, no inspections are done. We don't even have any legal precedents of cases that have been decided within the Sharia courts, yet they are quite many. We have quite a number of cases related to Muslim personal law, which have been decided in the High Court of Uganda, which has original jurisdiction. But you also find that the High Court only confirms the decisions of the Sharia courts and sends the parties back to the Sharia courts. So the lack of clear appellate procedures also affects women's access to justice, because if I am a woman seeking justice within the Sharia courts and the decision made is not within in favor of my human rights, that means that I must appeal to a higher authority. But every time we have sought appeal to within the statutory or the common law legal framework, you find that the judges still refer us back to the same courts where we failed to get justice. The issue for the court to handle Muslim personal laws is that they must decide the cases within the customs of Sharia, which customs are decided by patriarchal imams. And yet, we also don't have experts in Sharia that sit within the High Court. So a woman is left in balance. Where should the woman go to get justice? What promising interpretive frameworks can we use? We have quite a number of legal precedents which we can refer to, where we have the High Court confirming the legality of the decisions that have been decided by the Sharia courts, although this confirmation still leaves gaps of miscarriage of justice, especially due to the lack of a clear appellate structures. Recently, a constitutional petition was filed within the Constitutional Court. So we can still use the Constitutional Court requesting government to expedite the process of passing a law that operationalizes our Muslim personal law status and the Qadi courts which are currently operating informally. Then, of course, we can also establish collaborative partnerships with local imams. These were strategies that we used about 10 years ago, where we realized that the bill was a long way. It's because of lack of political will, it will be difficult for us to achieve that particular outcome. But the advocacy issues still remain eminent. The fact that the imams don't have any background on understanding human rights, gender responsiveness, applying principles of gender equality and human rights within the courts, we can still collaborate with the mosques, which have the Qadi courts sitting, to build their capacity for them to understand what are human rights within the secular, but also the religious framework. We can also continue advocating for policy reform, including enacting of a law to regulate the courts in order for them to adhere to human rights standards, but also to recognize women's rights and gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lina, for that and for grounding your speaking intervention on realities, your experience, and how very, very difficult and bad decisions are. How fortunate a very few women are to accessing legal aid and accessing female lawyers like yourself. But there are so many millions of Muslim women and women out there that are struggling to access justice in the work of the system that we operate in. So thank you so much to our three amazing speakers. And I also want to thank everyone that has continued to contribute. Keep the questions coming. I will request our panelists to respond to the questions that are coming in. There are a lot of contributions in Arabic. So, Nada, if you will respond to some of those questions that are coming in, the contributions. Thank you very much. I have seen some have shared social inclusion blogs. They can share. The SIHA team will also be sharing additional resources that we can also be able to read and engage deeper with this very vital conversation. At this point, before we open up for Q&A, we have a poll question that is coming up. There'll be a link that those of you that are joining online can click on, or there'll be a QR code that you can scan. And we'd like all the participants to contribute to the discussion. And we want to understand, in your context, which factors most strongly contribute to harmful interpretations of culture and religion that continue to affect and discriminate women and girls. It's been translated in Arabic, in Somali, in Amharic, and we also have it in English for us to be able to engage with this. So we'll do this for the next 2 minutes, and then I'll open this up for Q&A. So if any of the participants across the Horn of Africa region beyond have any questions, any comments, please put your hand up and I'll be coming to you in 2 minutes. But for now, we'll give 2 minutes for us to respond to this poll question. Thank you. I do hope everyone is able to access the poll question. It is in the 3 languages that we are translating this webinar into. Very important. On this note, as we continue to fill out and respond to the poll question, I would like to move around. I'll start with the hubs, and then if we have any online participants, feel free to put your hand up and speak in any of the 3 languages of your choice. So I'll start with, do we have any questions for any of our 3 panelists? Arua Hub. Okay, as we wait for Arua Hub to come on, I see there is a hand up from our online participants. So Manal, please go ahead. Please keep your question short and address it to one of the speakers. We will come back to Arua Hub.
Thank you very much. I am Right Honorable Tuku Ismail, a cultural leader in Arua City. The cultural institution is called the Lubarakari. Now, for us in Uganda, it is a bit fair that the government really has a will for the women, empowerment. That's why we have the vice president as a woman, we have the speaker of parliament as a woman, and we have the right honorable, the speaker, the vice president, and the prime minister. These are females. That is one good thing for us here. My challenge is, it's true we recognize and is that there is existence of sticky norms and that hinder development of women and girls' development programs. We have the inheritance rights, as he rightly put. This is something to do with the stopping women from accessing land. We have problem in other property, to be shared or taken by women, and that now gives gender-based violence to be at its peak. We have misinterpretation and assumption from the religious holy books. We talked about the Quran. Again, we talked about the Bible. In the Bible, there's interpretation that God made Eve or Hawa from Adam's rib, and therefore Hawa or Eva must be submissive entirely to Adam. That belief, that stereotype still exists, and that's why women are underrated. They are not taken fully as human beings. 2, we have the challenge in the Islamic religion that women should never slaughter animals for everybody to eat. But this is said by the sheikhs not to exist anywhere at all in the Quran. So how do we get these things done? Much as we're struggling to be together, like the cultural institution and the religious institution, we always sit together to resolve some of these things in order to make women benefit. But it's a bit unfortunate that Our courts are very expensive. Our courts are not accessed easily. At times, they ask a very poor woman to produce a lawyer in court in order to support her. I want to thank the Muslim lawyer, the female who spoke from Uganda. She is right to say that these things are very challenging. The court that we are talking of at times has a combination of only men. Now, where are the rights? Where are the women's representations? Because they say if the hyena is the judge for a goat, then the goat definitely has nowhere to win the case. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Honorable.
Lauren, there's one more comment.
Okay, please go ahead, Lillian. We will be coming to Ethiopia next.
Okay. Good day, everyone. My name is Annette Lekuru. I work with Feminature Uganda. Mine is really not a question or anything. It's just a comment about some of the patterns, the trends that we are seeing. And I was a little bit moved when is it Shinaz? No, Faizat, the comment she made about religion. But for me, I just wanted to say that I see religion as a double-edged sword, especially in advancing the rights of women and girls, because part of religion tends to be very conservative in a sense that they preach submission, they preach the domestic roles, these gender roles, and try to really promote those on one side. And by doing so, it continues to justify male authority and limit reproductive rights and property and public participation of women. On the other side, the progressive side of religion. I see it in a sense that many schools and health facilities are being run by religious institutions, the Catholic Church, the Muslim community, the Muslims, and then even the Protestant or the Anglicans, which is a very good thing. And we see a lot of that benefiting girls, and they're very active in advocacy against certain harmful practices, the FGMs of this world, and then of course child marriage and whatnot. So I thought that is, for me, that is how I position religion. I was telling my neighbor here how I once experienced challenges within the Catholic Church because I'd wanted to receive the sacrament of penance, what in Lubarati we call mariti. And on reaching the church, I was asked to go and bring my husband, who at the time was already my ex-husband, to seek for his permission. So you can imagine if even for somebody at my level, I am required to do such a thing within the church. How about that woman and girl who is in their community? Because why am I emphasizing the issue of religion is because many of our community members believe so much in religion. It's the gospel truth that influences their actions or inactions. So we need to really pay particular attention to and deeper within our advocacy work as women's rights organizations, feminist movements here in Arua and across the world in Addis Ababa and wherever else, the Horn of Africa. I also wanted to say something a little bit about the practice of bride price. Now, in the Lubara culture, I know there's pronouncements about this, but I wanted to say it in this particular context that certain cultures, even our people here, still consider bride price to be, yes, an appreciation in line with the most recent Supreme Court ruling that it is not compulsory and there's no return of bride price. But in certain communities that we work with, in the refugee and host communities, we see where there's been a separation, demands are still being made for the girls or the woman's side of the family to refund bride price. And I think these are very restrictive because then you can imagine what kind of definition we're giving to marriage, But also in our Lubara communities, I see even in my own extended family, if bride price is not paid, there's usually a problem. People start heaping curses and then they prolong the problem for years and years. They'll say, we don't know that there's a debt remaining, as if it is a must to be given. So I think there's still a lot for us to do because Many times when there's no the bride price is not fully paid up, children end up paying the price. You know, they are mistreated, they are burdened. In Lubarati, you find them being actually even called outcasts. You know, they're not part of the family, and those have ripple effects on how these children, which are many times also girls, live their lives, how they enjoy their rights in this world. So I think we need to really look into that and also support. I like the point which Mesh talked about education, legal education. I think in West Nile, that is really, that's the last part.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the last part. Yeah, so I think in West Nile, we have not really been very intentional in doing legal education, and it is a very, very prime time for us to now take this to the grassroots, the last mile woman and girl, and the man and the boy, so that they understand what the law says about some of these issues. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for those contributions, and we do thank you for trusting us with your personal experience and sharing that with us. It just continues to show how much women and girls, what they need to navigate and the dynamics when it comes to religion and culture. We will now be moving to Ethiopia.
There's one more. There's one more from Uganda.
I will request you to put your question and comment in the chat.
One short one, very short one.
Please, please share your comment, Arua, in the chat box. We will now be moving to Ethiopia. I sincerely apologize because we have to go to 5 other hubs. So we will not be able to give you an opportunity now, but we will respond to it in the questions. Addis Ababa, over to you.
Thank you.
My name is Hulla Agarish from Ethiopian Women Development Association. First and foremost, I want to thank SIHA Network for bringing together hubs from different African countries to share our experiences. And I want to thank you for this continuous efforts. Speaking from the previous experiences from other Horn of African countries, we have seen that most of the challenges they face are from traditions and religion. However, there might be contexts or differences in contexts from one country to another. In civil societies, we are also working very hard to protect the rights of women and to prevent them from any type of gender-based violence, and we're creating partnerships in this regard. Organizations in SIHA Network are working, and this can be also an expression of that. Women face different types of violences online and offline, and this it has not been possible to bring about change from the roots. We focus more on situations happening from time to time. My question is, currently in Ethiopia, under the Sharia law, if GM has sort of a religious perspective, there is a proclamation enacted to practices through medication or medical procedures. It was crafted in a way that it has a religious support. We have been going against it. I have actually asked in the chat box as well. So how can we together fight against this traditional practice so as to avert what has been enacted in the proclamation? And I thank you.
All right, thank you so much. I hope Faizat will be able to take on that question. Is there a second question from Ethiopia? We are good, Ms. Karam? Yes, please go ahead with the second question. And then we will be moving to Juba.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's not a question, actually. We have been discussing with the team regarding the topic on the cultural and religious interpretation from women's rights perspective. So our group consists of religious leaders and representatives from civil society organizations working on women's rights. So one of the discussion points was do religious scriptures affect or oppress women's, or does it affect women's rights? And the point mentioned by religious leaders is that they are claiming that the scriptures or religious documents do not oppress women's rights, rather they promote if they are interpreted correctly or if they are interpreted with the intention of the religion. So what they mentioned is the problem is not the scripture, or it's not the Quran or the Holy Bible. Rather, the problem is the interpretation given by the teachers or by the religious leaders. So the other point we are mentioning was, even though the problem is from the interpreter or from the teacher, after all, the teacher or the religious leader is the reflection of the society. They teach in the way the society accepts. They interpret the religious documents in the way the society accepts or would like to hear. So that is the problem, and that is the point we mentioned. So in general, regarding the religious documents or religious scriptures, they claim that the Quran or the Holy Bible doesn't or do not oppress women. Rather, they promote women's rights and they protect women's. So the problem is from the interpretation side or from the religious leaders. And this is because the religious leaders by himself or by herself is the reflection of the society. They are also affected by the stereotypes against the women or the attitude of the society. So that is the problem. And the other point where we have been discussing was really the society. Do you think that really the society change, or is there really societal attitude change? And the point we mentioned at this point was, of course, there are changes, no doubt, but the change are so gradual because still there is harmful traditional practice in Ethiopia, still there is gender-based violence and others, blah, blah. So, of course, there is change, but the change is gradual. The problem is, of course, there is a change that it's a gradual. We noted that whenever there is conflict or whenever there is a peace problem, harmful traditional practices, we believed that they have stopped or no more those traditional practices. So whenever there is a conflict or whenever there is government enforcement, they will arise, like FGM, child marriage, and extra. So sometimes it makes us to believe that the society is still believed in those cultures, in those harmful traditional practices. And there was change. That's because of the strong government, because of strong law enforcement mechanisms. So whenever there is conflict or whenever there is situations that weaken government enforcement, those harmful traditional practices, those violences against women will arise. And we witness that, of course. So still we need to work more on the society's attitude. The other point we have mentioned was, so what should be the solution, or what should be the strategy towards promoting women's rights? So the points mentioned by religious leader is we need to teach women's equality, women's rights in the religion institutions, in the mosque and in the church extra. So we need to give them sometimes or some sessions regarding women's rights for the society. The other thing is there
all
should
right.
be
Addis, I'm going to give you one more minute.
Women's rights cannot be achieved or cannot be done by one institution. Rather, there should be coordination and collaboration. So we need to have that. The other strategy we put is still women empowerment, or empowering women is the solution for the harmful interpretation of culture and religions. Once women are empowered, they can challenge the harmful interpretation provided by religious leaders or by the society. So teaching them, teaching women's rights in the religious institution, coordination among key stakeholders, and empowering women are the strategies or the solutions for backlash or to resist the harmful interpretation provided by religion and cultural institution. That was the brief of our discussion. If there are any questions, I think our member could provide more. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Ethiopia. We are still in the Q&A session. So I will move to Juba. Please confirm you have a question and you're not summarizing any discussions from your conversations. If you have a question, please go ahead and ask, and then I'll come to our panelists before going to Sudan and Somalia to check if we have questions. And then online, Tezez, please get ready.
يا شكرا أنا أستاذ بول جنارة سلمون أنا سعيد جدا
I'm very happy
بهذا
to be here, and I'm very happy to attend this very valuable lecture. I have three questions. The first question is based or directed towards Nadine. She spoke about the rights of minority groups in Egypt. So maybe if you could just actually elaborate on the minority rights, this would be great. It would be very interesting to hear what protections are offered to these minorities that exist in Egypt, non-Muslim groups within Egypt. The second question is addressed to our colleague in Uganda. Thank you very much. I'd just like to know how the Muslims, how they actually engage with the four schools of jurisprudence within Islam. So, for example, the Shafi'i jurisprudence, I want to know what do you see in terms of the differences between the different schools of jurisprudence into the context in Uganda, for example, the difference between the Shafi'i school and other schools. And the third and last question is related to examples from Islam. What is the position vis-a-vis Islamic jurisprudence and Christian-based teachings? How do you see this difference?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll be talking in the context of South Sudan. The second presenter talked about challenging the cultural and religious norms, which are very common in our cultural and religious context. But my question will basically be on the education sector. That when we go to the grassroots level, the awareness session, these are levels of norms. It's very for women in the grassroots level, and also mostly the enforcement level, the customary laws than the recent law. So as advocates, young advocates on organization under these cases, it's really hard for us to come up with reforms and practices to do away with these existing cultural norms and customs that are already existing in place. So how can you advise us to come up with reforms to advocate for equal rights and also the existing implementations, right? Because the implementation part is really limited and needs more action to be taken.
All right, thank you so much. We were struggling a little bit, Juba, with your internet connection. I think it was talking about how others have been able to have progressive legal and policy reforms, and how can this be shared with South Sudan. We've had a bit about that from some of our speakers, but there were a number of questions and comments that were raised. So Nada, I'll start with you. If you can pick 2 or 3 to respond to, I'll come to Faizat, and then Lina, there was a question specifically for you, and then we'll move over to Sudan and Somalia. Yes. So Nada, over to you.
Yes, شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you so much to me.
Which were addressed to me.
Because I was turning on my
first of all, I had 2 questions directed towards me, so I'm just going to go through very quickly. The first question was what
is the difference between the preventive
protection
justifications and the inter
and which the protection which is coming, which is used by the state, is not always based on religious parameters. It's sometimes based on cultural understandings, and sometimes it's a mishmash between religious understandings and religious understandings. However, the Salafi component is a very literalist interpretation of verses. So it's extremely limited and quite patriarchal, but it's actually then enshrined with the holiness of religion. And this is a huge difference. This is no, sorry, this is a very minimal difference. If I've understood this question, it's a minimal difference. Now, in terms of the protection of minorities, the civil society protects, tries to protect these different minorities and to offer legal support and to offer psychological and social support, and to try and protect refugees and people, different groups who are vulnerable within Egypt. However, but as we witness, of course, people who are vulnerable are also subjected to the kind of vulnerabilities which Egyptian people are also subjected to. We need to reevaluate these parameters because they are weak. The civil society has a limited role to play, but we're trying.
نقاط سريعة في أحد الزملاء قال نقطة مهمة
Quickly,
قوي.
one of the colleagues said,
فاكرة في أنهي دولة لما قال إنه أشيوخ بيقولوا إن لا يجوز للنساء إن هم يذبحوا. ودي نقطة محورية، يعني هذا المثال البسيط، يعني في مصر مثلا عندنا لا يجوز عادي. ده جاي منين؟ تاني جاي من اختلاف الفقه. طب ليه هو بيتم استخدامه؟ بيتم استخدامه من هذا المنظور بتاع انه الستات محتاجين نقيدهم ونقيد حركتهم ونقيد قراراتهم الجسدية، فنبتدي بقى مرة نقول يجوز مرة نقول لا يجوز. هذا التنوع هو أساسا لو فكرنا فيها هو مساحة حقيقية. لو احنا عايزين ندفع بقوانين أكثر عدالة وأكثر مساواة وأكثر انفتاحا، هو الحقيقة التنوع ده بيديني المساحة. لكن المشكلة الرئيسية مرة أخرى في السلطة في رجال الدين، وده يدخلني على آخر نقطة أنا عايزة أتطرق لها. أعتقد إنه كان نقطة مهمة جدا من الأخوات في إثيوبيا. هي المشكلة في التفسير أم المشكلة في رجال الدين؟ والحقيقة المشكلة في الاتنين. بمعنى إنه أنا عندي رجل دين ما مصر على تفسير ما، التفسير ده هو قاص تاني، قاصر جدا وضيق جدا، بس هو كمان معتمد على تفسير. يعني الرجل الدين ده معتمد على
the
تفسير.
religious leaders rely on previous interpretations which are limited. In my view, religious leaders they are afraid to really discuss who can really in the current war produce something that would keep up with the modernity. In fact, they are few if they are there in the first place. There's a problem that society are not accepting them, and also the state is trying to restrict any new attempts of new religious interpretations. And this is especially problematic in the Arabic world and related to the authority. These are some points we can discuss on further, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nada, for that. Faiza, if you can respond to the question that was raised to you.
Absolutely. Sure. Thanks, Lauren. And thank you so much for asking that question. And I think there is there are a couple of recommendations on things that we can do with regards to specifically that proclamation. I'll refer to the one released by the Islamic Supreme Council on FGM, more or less permitting FGM. And for me, the first that would start, as we've so much talked about the legal processes, will be back to the legal processes. Because the first thing is that the Constitution, Article 35.4, clearly prohibits, any kind of laws, customs, and practices that causes bodily harm or mental harm to women. And then you also have the criminal code that criminalizes all forms of FGM. So a constitutional challenge in court or strategic litigation would be helpful if that could be taken forward to kind of ask the courts to interpret the proclamation, and that can, easily make it go away. The second I would also say is, maybe working with the ministries, so the Ministry of Justice or the Ministry of Women and Social Affairs or Ministry of Health, to issue joint clarification on the impact of the health, because they base their reasoning on health, and then secondly, they based it off of religious as well. So making them make those statements, even though it's legally, it's being criminalized by law, but I think them reinforcing it also helps, the community who genuinely believe in the fatwa being released. The third would also be, as the colleague from Arua mentioned, religion holds double sword. We can also, use the same text or use the same language to engage with the religious leaders. So kind of working with progressive Islamic scholars who can issue a counter fatwa, or even feminist organizations. And I saw that, some organizations have released some statements, including SIHA actually did an article on it as well. So I think working again to kind of change the perspective and change the narratives and show the harm that can happen if women and girls do proceed with such fatwa. And the last thing would also be engaging the Islamic Affairs Supreme Council themselves. They need to have a joint roundtable to kind of just go deeper into the conversation on what it means for women and girls, the impact, going with numbers, so evidence-based advocacy as well, and documenting the harms that have happened, based on this health, right? They said if it's health, you can do it. As long as it's done within the medical facilities. But we still experience lots of deaths within the medical facilities. So documenting those as well and engaging with them to see the impact of the fatwa that they're releasing and how it impacts women and girls directly. So all of this also boils down to advocacy. So and advocating and discussing, even if it's going to court, make sure that it's popularized. That really helped in Nigeria with the case of Amina Lawal, who was sentenced to death. So while there were feminist lawyers in courts trying to overturn the narrative, but they also heavily capitalized on the media. They, went on the media, they kept on talking about it. It became a world news, CNN. So even when the Court of Appeal was overruling, they had to find religious grounds to overrule the conviction. But we also know that the media role and the international role also played something in it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faiza. Lina, I'll give you 2 minutes to respond to the question that was addressed to you, and then we'll be moving on to Wow, Hab, and then Kasala. So Lina, over to you.
Okay, so the question of the impact of having different religious sects, I confirm that in Uganda, we have different religious sects, including the Ahmadiyya, we have the Salafs, we have the Sunni, and we have the Tablighs. And indeed, all these sects have different interpretations of the religious text and understanding, including application of the religious norms. So we also have different factions as well within the sects, which have largely also contributed to the Muslim wrangles. So you find that one of the main reasons why we have failed to have a law regulating our Muslim personal law status is because of the different interpretations by the sects. In the process of advocating for this law, we have conducted several consultations from these different factions and sects, and indeed, they have failed to harmonize, to come up with one single common position about which particular laws will be codified from the Quran and the Hadith. So obviously, because of the divergent views, you find that we are failing to harmonize on which particular position we are taking as extracted from the Quran and the Hadith. Otherwise, with regards to Christianity, if I got the question well, in Uganda, we exercise freedom of religion. And it is a full article in the Constitution where one is free to decide which legal regime will regulate their personal law status. So as Muslim, I can choose to be married within the civil code of laws, and it is the civil laws that will regulate my marriage even as a Muslim. So whichever legal regime you choose is what will regulate your marriage, divorce, inheritance, and child custody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lina. I will now be going to Wow Hub. If you can share with us some of your comments, reflections from the conversation you had in your hub, it would be nice to hear from you. We've not given you an opportunity. That's Wow in South Sudan. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Hello. Women and girls in South Sudan, in Bahr al-Ghazal state, their rights are undermined. Sometimes we have earliest mothers of daughters do not have any right to decide on the marriage of their daughters. Males are dominating. Daughters are sometimes not allowed to choose their husbands. This is happening in our society. Religions give women the right to choose their husbands. In Islam, women can marry off themselves if they don't have custodians. In Christianity, marriage is arranged in the church, and they would ask husband and wives, but it is noted uh, uh, male felt that marriage in the Christian religion is limiting their authority, and they are now resorting to Islam because Islam is allowing uh, polygamy. Our traditions and norms are dominating more than cultures. No. Marriage is considered in our society as an opportunity to have a fortune. Families who have many daughters feel like they would have an opportunity to have more money in the future. Unlike the general regard on marriage as an opportunity for girls and boys to settle, there are other practices that undermine women's rights. We don't have girls' education. The society care more about boys' education because in the future for them they would be the breadwinners for their families, and they would be leaders in the future. In Bahr al-Ghazal state and South Sudan in general, our rights of inheritance are also undermined. Some tribes do not allow women to inherit, especially those who are married. In our society have Muslims and Christians, but in Islam, the women are allowed to inherit. Even Christianity allows women to inherit, but the practices that are existing here are from the traditions. We hope people discuss this so that women inherit, so that their kids benefit from this. Another thing is the decision making in our society. Women are absent in the decision making tables, and this is due to the traditions and norms. And some people view this from a religious point of view, that women do not have responsibilities in this, and it is a shame to give the destiny of our lives to women. Some tribes. Oh.
Yeah, in some ethnic groups within Bahr al-Ghazal, it's very difficult for women to participate because of these patriarchal norms. The idea is also about women's leadership. Sometimes women's leadership is an impediment to her marital status, which is favored for women. So decision making is always associated with male positions within society, and therefore women are not allowed this access to leadership roles in the same capacity.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Wahab, for that very rich contribution. We appreciate it. We will now be moving to Kassala in Sudan. Wahab, we will now be moving over to Kassala in Sudan. So we request you to put your comment in the chat box. Ma'ab, over to you. Please go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us here in Kassala. War pertains to what's actually transpiring in relation to the educational sector. We now are confronted with the issue of minors being married off forcibly, and the laws are not robust enough to protect against these infractions on young girls' rights. Some of the legal and religious leaders have not proclaimed that this marriage of minors is a violation, because sometimes there is a misquotation of Islamic cultures and histories where people actually reinforce the idea that the Prophet himself married a minor who was only 9 years of age, and therefore there is a confusion about these understandings, and there is an ambiguity around these parameters, and the religious leaders actually advocate sometimes for these marriages which are too young, and we are therefore faced with these challenges which violate the rights of women. And we know that these practices are sometimes related to a very concrete material circumstances, and which are very deeply connected to issues pertaining to poverty. And therefore, they're perceived as a kind of a solution to some of these challenges. After the age of 12, it is widely viewed that girls are in a position to be married off. The marriages actually take place and are only consummated a while after. So the marriage contract is actually conducted on a preliminary basis before the marriage is actually consummated a year later in some cases. These practices also affect homeless children who are left vulnerable, and the law is not robust enough to protect against these practices.
All right. Thank you, Kasalatim, for that very rich contribution to this conversation. We do appreciate all the comments and sharing your experience. Now we'll be moving on to the Somali region. So if you can give us a summary of some of the Rashida, are you there?
Hi, Lauren. Hi, everyone. Can you please confirm if you're hearing me very well?
Yes, we hear you now. Thanks. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I will conclude in 1 minute about the summary of today. Then I will take 2 minutes to reflect all the 7 series of It's Not Your Fault campaign. First of all, if I go the summary of today, our participants discussed that one of the most challenging things about the religion in Somalia is the wrong interpretation about the Islamic way. And since the most of men are, we have the most of religious leaders are men, they interpret the religion in a very way, in a very bad way, which is make a lot of Somali women face a discrimination and injustice through the religious. And if I come about the culture, the Somali woman doesn't have any space in the culture because of always culture support the men when we are in Somalia. So that's all about today's summary. If I go recap about this campaign, me and our participation both in Somaliland and Somalia, in Somali region, it was our honor to be part of this campaign. Our first webinar focused on femicide, a topic that is deeply painful, yet necessary for all our us working to.
Rashida, I think we will come back to that. So let us go to Juba with the summaries. We'll come back to Somalia. Juba team, please conclude with your summary.
Thank you. This is Thank you. Am I being heard? Okay, thank you. This is Juba and I'll be making a very brief sum of the discussions we had today. Basing on the topic, we looked at basically 3 things. We looked at the legal frameworks in our country, South Sudan, which is the transitional constitution of the Republic of South Sudan 2018. Article 16 talks of equality between men and women. And it also talks of rights to form a family. That's Article 15 of the same transitional constitution. And then the rights of the girl child from protection from early and forced marriages. That's Article 17. We also looked at the Child Act 2008, Article 16, subsection 15, which talks about women's rights to own property. Section 16 also we looked at Section 16, subsection 3 of the Transitional Constitution that stipulates the rights of participation of women and men in public life equally. Equally the same to Article 29, the rights of a female child to education. We also looked at the Local Government Act 2009. These are the frameworks we're talking about. talks about rights of women and girls in terms of employment, full participation in public life. Then we narrowed down into the religious aspects. Particularly, we have Christians probably dominating South Sudan and Muslims, and then we have the African traditional believers. So what is the view of the Christians in regards to women and girls' rights? We discussed that the Christian faith gives some bit of freedom to women. Women have taken over a few positions, a few leadership positions in the church. But however, there are also certain doctrines that do not allow women, for example, to take up positions. Certain doctrines within the Christian faith, such as if you marry a second wife, she's not supposed to take Holy Communion, or even the child of that second wife is not supposed to be baptized as early as a baby. And we also looked at the Catholic faith, particularly the Catholic faith stipulates that a woman is a partner, and for that matter, she has all the rights to everything except divorce. She doesn't have that right to divorce. At the Muslim view, the Holy Quran gave rights to the women, rights of marriage and own properties, rights even of owning property of their father or maybe parents, and even rights to divorce in situation that maybe they have stayed for 6 months without being close to each other, or maybe in events that either the man is not able to perform his duty as expected as a man. So what is the traditional beliefs on the rights of women and girls? We particularly said, for example, women by nature they have supreme powers, and based on the 64 tribes that we have or more. One key challenge we realize is that women are always neglected from during negotiations. For example, when their daughters are getting married, they are always kept aside, probably in the kitchen. You see, preparing food for the men in negotiation, and this impacts actually to them a lot. They don't even pay the women who gave birth and nurse this girl. They don't even benefit from any of those dowries. However, equally, some cultures also allow women to own properties across the country, and while others do not. So I think that's basically the summary that we discussed, and thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Juba. I think there is a bit of clarity that I hope the panelists will make in their concluding remarks around rights on divorce to what was just shared. But thank you so much to everyone from across the region that has been able to contribute to this conversation. As we come to the close of this webinar, I would like to give each of the speakers, the panelists, 1 minute to close. And if one of you can provide some clarity to what was just shared by the Juba Hub. I will start with Nada in 1 minute, if you can give some concluding remarks, and then Lina.
Yes, thank you so much. في الختام اللي أنا حابة أقوله إنه لا بديل دلوقتي عن العمل المشترك، ولا بديل عن إن إحنا نبقى بنشتغل من القاعدة من الشارع. إحنا على الرغم من إن سياقاتنا مختلفة، ولكن تحدياتنا متشابهة جدا جدا جدا. حتى هذه اللحظة بيتم استخدام قوانين مجحفة في حق نساء وأطفال ورجال، بيتم استخدامها باسم الدين، باسم الثقافة، باسم أشياء كتيرة جدا. والمساحات المدنية الحقيقة بتغلق كل يوم أكتر عن اليوم اللي قبله. وده بيخلي ان التحدي اكبر على العمل الميداني والعمل مع الفئات المختلفة. لكن لا بديل عنه في هذه المرحلة، لا بديل عن طرح وبقوة الإشكاليات اللي احنا بنتعامل معاها، ولا بديل عن إن احنا نستخدم نفس الأدوات. ما احنا محتاجين نبقى مسلحين نفسنا بالمعرفة ونستخدم نفس الأدوات اللي بيتم استخدامها ضدنا، علشان نبقى قادرين نرد ونقول لن نقبل أن يتم مساومتنا على حقوقنا، ولن نقبل أن يتم مساومتنا على أساسيات. شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you. Shukran, Nada. It has been a pleasure having you in this webinar. Lena, 1 minute to close and give any final remarks.
So as we conclude, I'd like to say that as we push for reforms within our legislative legal system, as we push for reforms of legislative reforms within our legal systems, it is equally important for us to consider the advocacy gaps which remain eminent in regards to access to justice, human rights, and gender equality. As we push for these reforms, we should also specifically implement issues of enhancing awareness about women's rights and access to justice, including the referral pathways and how best they can navigate the legal system. Because for some of us, I see that law reform in our country is a long way coming, and yet the gaps remain eminent.
Thank you so much, Lena, for those final remarks. Faizat, your concluding remarks.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, everyone. I think just really thankful for the comments that have come in, for the conversation, and it was really interesting hearing all the comments that came in from each of the country. I think that, for me, my closing remark would just be to really thank the feminist organizations and feminist scholars who have laid the groundwork for us already. They've already produced and provided us with all the tools that we need. So it's the groundwork that is remaining for us is using those tools, using our power of advocacy, using our power of collective organizing, and using these spaces to be able to challenge, the patriarchal, cultural, and religious norms that continue to exist today. And I think that with that and the collective power, we have a lot more. We have a lot of work in our front, but we've also done a lot. So just appreciating that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Faiza. And it is only befitting that we close, because this is the final 7 of 7 series of the It's Not Her Fault campaign, that we invite SIHA's regional director that has been spearheading this campaign and been part of these conversations that we started since June. So I would like on this note to invite Hala to give remarks as we close this campaign.
Thank you very much, Laureen. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who has been so committed and dedicated to be part of this, learning spaces. All of us, we have learned a lot from being here with you and from learning, and exposing ourselves to the different topics and very, very serious and productive conversation that we have been having. And this is how it should be. We should always make sure that those spaces are in place, and we have to make sure that this type of interactions is happening between us, because this is the whole purpose of SIHA, is that we should be able to speak to each other and learn from each other and listen to each other's experiences. I have been listening very keenly, to your productive comments and the very interesting conversations. I would like to applaud the efforts of the presenters for this last final session. And I think it's intentional by SIHA that we put the, how religion and culture are influencing and affecting women's human rights at the last session this year. We're hoping that we will be able to resume these interactive learning platforms, hopefully next year. And we will be really looking for ideas and thoughts from your sides and contributions in terms of how we can do better and how we can make it much more effective. The challenges, the issue of religion and culture and their impacts on the women's human rights, it's something that we cannot hide from anymore. And it's an issue that we should be interrogating regularly and thinking about. And, our lived experiences and what we are going through is what should inform this conversation, and not other people who cannot relate to us and cannot relate to our lived experiences and our challenges. And that's really very, very important. I will borrow a quote by one of my teachers, feminist teachers, Dr. Zibamir Hosseini, who once said that the women around the world cannot afford abandon, interrogating religion and its impact on their lives, because religion is power. And this is why it's critical for us to engage with it, and to get involved and to try to understand, the roots of discriminations that is stemmed in the religious interpretations, and to have our own perspective and our own visions. And I'm just saying, it's not only Islamic religion, Islamic and Christian religion. Unfortunately, our continent has become a backyard, for a very random, interpretations and guidance that's ultimately meant to hold us back, and to exploit us and to exploit our resources. Not innocent thing, it's not. So we really have to be careful, as we are looking at the factors that's affecting, our faith and how we interact with it. And the power of colonialisms and, actors who are coming to us from parts of the world, pretending to be, they have interest and they are protecting us, and we have to tell them that we don't need protections. We have our own understanding of our faith, and we know how to engage with it and be only protective of our human rights, of our identities, and of what works for us. That's the most important thing. Before we close, I would like to acknowledge the enormous and most significant and brilliant effort of my colleague, Laureen. I don't think we could have, get this space of interactive learning without her dedications and commitment, as usual, Laureen, and as always, we are very, very grateful, and we look forward to continue interacting with you. Her commitment to feminist values, her passion about women's human rights has made this possible. I would also like to acknowledge those who are behind the scene that you don't see, who are helping us making those spaces possible for all of you, all the technical actors that we know of them, and some we don't know of them, on the different hubs in Addis, in South Sudan, in Kassala, in Juba, in Wau, and in other parts of in Mogadishu, in Hargeisa, and other parts of the region. We are so grateful for your dedications. I would like to acknowledge, the amazing efforts of the interpreters. Without effective simultaneous interpretations, the concepts that we are trying to share with you and the learning, it would have not been possible. And we have learned that interpretation is critical, for our network and for SIHA, that we cannot do anything without interpretation if we claim that we have commitments, to each other's learning and to grassroots learning. So I'd also like to acknowledge my colleagues at the SIHA Communications and advocacy team. They have been amazing. Sandra, thank you so much for making this idea a reality. Ramu, very, very grateful for your commitments and dedications. Maab and Sylvia, you have done great work. Ronnie at our regional hub, all of you, you have done really fantastic work. And you just made it happen, and now we know how to do it really good, and we learn every time from each other. With this, I wish you a fantastic evening, and I hope I did not forget anyone. I'd also like to acknowledge Faiza, our program manager, for being present, observant, critical, and giving guidance to the team throughout the past few months, and also for her ongoing input and contributions to those learning spaces. Thank you so much, guys. Enjoy the evening. Laureen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Hala. I see so much love from everyone else. We are saying thank you to the SIHA team for having created this space. The last 6 months, I was just counting all the different speakers we've had, and they're beyond 25, and also from all the hubs. It goes to almost 50. So thank you so much, SIHA. This has been something about, a very, very important conversation, deep conversation that affects women and girls across the Horn of Africa. And we are glad that we had the opportunity to speak about all of these themes. On this note, as we end the webinar, we do have a survey. So I would like to request that we click on the link on the survey or scan the QR code to see her feedback on how the entire campaign has gone, how you feel we should be able to engage beyond this campaign, and how we can continue to connect with you on these issues. So there is a link that is being shared in the chat and on the screen. And if you can turn your videos on, it would be lovely to take one final group photo of everyone. And I would like to say thank you so much to everyone, and it's been a pleasure being a moderator for the 7 series of It's Not Her Fault campaign. So thank you so much, everyone. If you can turn your videos on, please do so. We do appreciate everyone that has been here, and to our amazing speakers today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I would like to request the SIHA Tech team to take photos and to let us know when you have done that. Okay, done? Yeah, and for those of you who can't get your camera on, it will come on eventually. Okay, so I've been informed 1 more minute, and then we'll have all the pictures of everyone. All right, thank you so much, everyone, and we request you please leave your feedback in the survey and exit at will. Thank you again.